Okay, here we go. Theoretically, anybody watching the recording afterwards, you can skip probably the first 5 minutes or so, I would say. 'Cause I'm gonna stop spending so long in the pre-start time frame. And Google's AI failed, or YouTube's AI. Still Google's because Google owns YouTube now. We go to edit video. Uh, Content. Go over here. Turn monetization on. Load. Then into the control room. And sit. Come on, man. Dismiss. Live chat, not top chat. Okay, that's everything in that regard. So let's pull up the usual lazy streamer tool, which is Google Earth. It's also my eternal nemesis because it constantly makes my mouse cursor freeze. No other program seems to do it, just Google Earth for some reason. And I'm congested, as always, when streaming, which is why I require a lot of Mucinex, which is one of the only things still made in the UK. You guys don't really make stuff anymore, but don't worry. I'll my purchases of Mucinex medication will keep your entire economy afloat, at least for a while. In Germany, I'll hold you guys up too with my German chocolate addiction. Can't promise anything for anybody else though. All right, have that up. Did I have anything here we were going to need? I don't know. If so, I would hope I put it in the right place. Okay, I don't see anything out here. So assumably it is in the correct place, if it is here at all. Was there anything? I updated that map, so we will look at that one. Did I update the viewer map? I did not. Actually, while we're waiting, we'll go ahead and do that. Since not just a talking commenter, but a entire Patreon patron from Denmark, we now actually have to color in Denmark. This is the map of countries in which people who actually speak on the channel, whether in comments or whether in live chat, and I don't mean just like once, like every 5 years, I mean like frequently enough. So adding Denmark now, and I think I have everybody, but feel free to correct me if your country is missing. But I think this is everybody, at least for the moment. Right, so we do have those, and we'll get this up for the bookmarks. Ooh, a manul, a palace cat. Look at that precious angry kitty. Instant like. Get the bookmarks up. Anybody? Okay, well, you guys are here, but chat is dead. But then again, it's always dead. 4 minutes. Okay, one more minute. Then we're starting. So let me drink some more water. Drink this water. Okay. All right, so we have everything set up there. We'll do the Middle East stuff first this time, and I'm trying to save on time, so I'm not going to do a whole recap of the last 6 months every single stream. You guys will have to just live with having to be geopolitically aware yourselves. But we will be talking about all the stuff that happened over like the last 2 weeks since the last time we talked about it. And then the Russia Ukraine stuff. There's no more new China Taiwan stuff yet. Emphasis on yet. And then we have a whole bunch of oil and gas and economic news to go into, including my called and now celebrating slash celebrated rise of Kazakhstan. But we'll be getting into that in a bit. About over 5 minutes. So, 6. My bit rate is not zero. Stop telling me my bit rate is zero. What's my bit rate? It is not zero. It is way above zero. Okay. And I'm going to have to frequently check chat myself because Josh is streaming right now. So I cannot rely on him to mob the chat if anybody does talk. But chat's been dead for the last several streams, so that shouldn't be an issue. All right, so I forgot where we left off in the Israel Middle East war arc of this anime. The last time I was talking about it, but I think it was just after Iran did that massive ballistic and cruise missile strike on Israel directly, and Israel did actually strike back at least a little bit so far. There's decent hints based on the nature of the strikes that they're actually going to do something much bigger probably next month. So they did conduct a strike inside of Iran. They most likely the 35s, since Iran didn't detect anything. So they did strike the city of Isfahan or an airbase near to it. Specifically, I'm probably going to have to scroll down a long way to find that satellite imagery because I have a lot of bookmarks stacked up. But specifically, they hit. Uh, there it is. They hit. What does this play out? Is this a before versus after thing? I think it is. But yeah, they hit. They hit some AD systems, some SAM systems, air defense, surface-to-air missiles. At that airbase that are primarily there to protect one of Iran's nuclear development facilities, which is nearby. And there are also some of Iran's very few combat jets stationed at that base, some of their old F-14s, which their fleet is very gradually shrinking from. So, unknown if any of those were damaged, but the air defense systems at that base or around that city were taken out, which kind of is a bit indicative that Iran or that Israel intends to hit that facility itself sometime soon. Also, Israel struck numerous early warning radar systems or radars in Syria that are not attached to any SAM systems or air defense missile systems. They're just radars to track when Israeli aircraft are coming through, so that Syria can then tell Iran really quick that Israeli aircraft are coming. And since the F-35s can just come and go as they please, not being detected at all, the fact that Israel took those out is another kind of big hint that they are actually intending to do something huge soon. Because if uh, whatever they're doing is not able to be done with just the few F-35s that they have at the moment, then that would imply they're going to want to use their larger aircraft fleet, which after the few F-35s is predominantly composed of F-16s and the much better, superior, best aircraft of all time, because my childhood nostalgia says so, and my childhood nostalgia is correct, objectively correct, in fact. The rest of the rest of their combat force is the F-15. So if Israel intends to do something very large, they would have to use a lot of their F-16s and F-15s instead of just the few F-35s that they have. And the F-16 and F-15 are not radar invisible. So, the fact that Israel used the F-35s, which are radar invisible, to take out the radar systems, which would not see them anyways, kind of implies that they intend to be using a at least decent amount of aircraft that would be detected by radar. And if they're going to have to use those, then that means they're probably intending to carry out some load of strikes in the near future that's at least to do it within like a very short time frame, like one night or a couple nights, would need to have more aircraft involved than just their F-35s to carry everything out. So they took out those early warning radar systems and they hit the air defense systems in Isfahan. Now, I doubt when they do this big strike, I highly doubt Isfahan, the nuclear facility there, is the only thing that they're going to go for. The fact that they took out the air defense system there indicates that that is probably one of the primary targets. But Iran has several other facilities, a lot of which don't have air defense systems around them, simply because Iran doesn't have that much AD on hand to begin with. And a decent portion of it they keep more along the border because it was intended to be useful for any incoming Israeli aircraft back before Israel had F-35s, back when the only aircraft they had were 16s and 15s, which are in fact visible to radar. So they are probably going to be hitting other things. I would assume they'll probably hit the airbase too when they hit that nuclear facility. They're probably also going to hit the airbase as well. Why not take out the old Tomcats while you're at it? But they're probably also going to hit a few other things. I would assume they're going to go for at least what nuclear enrichment facilities they can hit. And Iran has several, one of which up here, I believe, is buried deep into the mountains. So the only way to take it out would be to hit it with enough, bunker busting penetrators. I forget whether that's the Paveway or not, or a different bomb name, but hit it with enough of those with enough payload on each to eventually at least just cause the inside of the facility to cave in on itself. So to do that, you would need to hit it a lot, which kind of would, require having a lot of sorties going there, which, lends more credence to the fact that they're going to need more than just their F-35s, which then, lends credence to them probably going to be using a fair number of their 16s and 15s, and thus that being why they took out all these early warning radars in Syria. Because again, if they were just going to do a few more smaller strikes, they could just keep using the F-35s and not have to care about any of the AD systems or early warning radar systems because they wouldn't see the 35 anyways. But the fact that they took those out, both the early warning radars in Syria and the AD systems within Iran, around Isfahan in particular, is indicative that they intend to be doing, something fairly larger, which will need to involve a lot more aircraft than just a few F-35s. So something larger on Israel's part to/within Iran is likely coming. I would assume, since they kind of sort of hinted at it not being until May, that it won't be until May. Granted, May is next week. So it could be as early as next week, or it could be later than that. It's not like I have access to their schedule or anything. Obviously, check chat because we don't have Josh here. Chat's dead anyways. Okay, so don't need to worry about that for the moment. Also, up in the north here, I've told you guys before, and actually Israel told you, they told everybody publicly back at the start of this year that they intend to invade southern Lebanon. This area here primarily because that's where most of Hezbollah is located. So they, instead of having to cross a bunch of Hezbollah's set up stuff here, Israel is going to come in and do a hook swing around here through the occupied Golan region, because the only obstacle there is their own minefield, which they have been working to dismantle over the last few weeks. And Hezbollah, as of I believe it was yesterday or the day before, is starting to. Well, they probably did believe Israel is actually going to do the invasion already, but they've actually started taking proactive measures before Israel actually does invade. And there was a big fight up here in the border region while Israel was dismantling more of the minefields. Hezbollah did a ambush from like I don't remember the exact location, but it was somewhere around here because there's like a place with two hills, so it was probably like right in here where there's like a narrow pass. And Hezbollah managed to sneak some guys over the border onto like both of the hillsides. And while Israel was like dismantling stuff up around here, they fired down on them with a bunch of anti-tank munitions. And so there weren't any tanks there because they're clearing mines at the moment. They're using mine clearing vehicles, and obviously they do have a bunch of like APCs and probably some IFEs there with them, and a bunch of dudes. So primarily, most likely, they were targeting, or at least trying to target the mine clearing vehicles and the bunch of regular IDF infantry dudes that were just out and exposed. No actual released figures on casualties or vehicle damage from that yet. Israel's managing to keep a lid on that, but probably, at least based on the nature of it, there's probably at least a few dozen guys got killed. And I mean, there are weaker, like Wolf APCs or MRAPs. Some of those could more easily be taken out by anti-tank munitions. Some of the more complex stuff that has like reactive armor and everything would be a bit more protected. But I would assume that the teams that Hezbollah snuck over would probably be targeting the mine clearing vehicles, since the mine clearing vehicles, are kind of the key thing to clearing the mines, which once the mines are cleared will enable Israel a path to do their whole hook westward swing around invasion route here. So I'll be watching to see if I get any more specific information about how that particular event went down the other night. And both Israel and Iran are saying the same thing. So Israel and uh, allies of Israel have been ratcheting up the whole Iran's about to get nukes in a couple months rhetoric, as part of the pretense for striking stuff. However, they switched it to only a few weeks. Now, most of the press release stuff or conferences they do are constantly claiming that Iran could have nukes within just a few weeks instead of just a few months now. However, now Iran has completely abandoned the denial policy and is just like going full ham with it and agreeing with the claims that Israel and associated allies are making about them. Except Iran is going like even further with it and saying, no, it's not even multiple weeks. We could actually have a few nukes within 1 week. So Iran is now actually like pouring more lighter fluid onto their own fire, because that's kind of going to press everybody to want to strike them more before they're able to actually develop anything. And also, they've started not just the uprisings in Balochistan, which is going to break away eventually, but they've started seeing a 2022-esque series of protests starting to pop up around the country, not from a a girl being beaten to death with her because her hijab fell off this time. But now it's because they're uh, the Iranian security forces or the religious police, whatever they're called, are just straight up executing people, like not even like execution sentence. They're just straight up like the old school style few shots in the back and then a shot to the back of the head once the person's on the ground type of thing, just in the streets, is their new manner of response to stuff. And so, as it turns out, when you do that, that doesn't really make the people like you that much. It tends to make them want to revolt. And so now, the people, particularly down in the southwestern region here, have been, having a fun time, tipping vehicles and lighting stuff on fire and everything. And Tehran's response to this, the government's response to, them obviously pushing things a bit much, is that they're going to push things even harder after, this whole thing was already the result of them pushing things even harder. Well, now they're going to push things even more harder. So they're really, really committed to self annihilation. Like, from a psychological standpoint, you got to wonder if the guys in power are just like tired and like want to leave or something. But do they like think they can't? Do they think they need some kind of excuse, like being chased out of the country by revolutionaries or something? You guys like have access to all the money. You can leave if you want. There's plenty of places that will like let you stay there. Probably. I mean, as much as they're like allies of the West, the UAE doesn't really care that much about people being wanted by other countries. Dubai especially will kind of just let anybody stay there. That's actually where Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, is probably going to end up fleeing uh, once Russia no longer is like propping him up, and the people like do their 2020 2.0. He has actually kind of dropped hints himself, like publicly, that Dubai is like his plan to run to when things finally fall apart for him. So I mean, you could flee to Dubai probably if you wanted to. You don't have to go this whole route of fomenting a revolution against yourself. I'm not sure what you intend to gain from this if you're actually making this as a supposedly rational decision. And also the uprisings and secessionism in Balochistan continue. Don't worry, Balochistan, you'll be free soon enough. And I think that's all of the Middle East stuff. All right, that is all the Middle East stuff for now. Let's check chat. There's nobody in chat. Okay, so before we go into some economic good news, we'll talk about some economic not so great news. So everybody's familiar with Eskom, South Africa's power industry, their electricity generation industry that is so bankrupt, so dilapidated, and so subject to underfunding because so many of South Africa's politicians just funnel money away from the power grid maintenance division or whatever, into their own bank accounts. Of all the things, of all the departments you could choose to like steal money from, that's the choice you go with. One of the most critical foundational things. So that is running itself into the ground. South Africa, for the last number of years has been in a state of constantly having, and my mouse cursor is frozen. No, it's not. Now it is. No, it's not. Okay, make up your mind. South Africa has been in a state off and on of having like nearly nationwide daily blackouts, sometimes as much as like half the country being without power for half of the day. Well, last year, you remember early last year, the government threw $4 billion at the power industry and said, "Hey, here's some money, uh, fix it." Now, not all of that money made it to the power industry. Obviously, some of it did get funneled into personal bank accounts. What did make it to the power industry did fix things for a couple months, and then everything immediately resumed. And so, on a full financial analysis of this systemic breakdown of their electricity grid, South Africa, or rather Eskom itself, has determined that not to modernize and repair the electric grid, okay, not to actually fix it, but to stabilize things and keep them from going in a total collapse for to like stave that off and put the grid in a state where that will be avoided for like at least a few years, and power access might be normalized for like a year or two, will cost at least $21 billion. So they're kind of hoping the government will spend that money. However, for one, the South African government might not, and because they're not the most reliable, and also nowhere near that whole 21 billion would actually even make it to the power industry because of all the other things we discussed. So South Africa remains completely screwed. Plus, also the railway network is breaking down primarily because of gangs stealing like the switchboard computer systems and everything to hustle the precious metals on the black market, and also their water distribution pipeline network is now breaking down, especially around Johannesburg. So yeah, sorry, South Africa, you guys are kind of just dead. So fallen nation. Now, right next to them, however, we have a much better case of a country economically uprising and going to be making quite a bit of money. So down here in this area where it kind of bows in, so it has, kind of a funnel that stuff would have been falling off of, and sediment and silt would have come down and buried things over. Down here is where most of the oil and gas exploration offshore Namibia has taken place, down off their very southwestern corner tip. And they already had 4 discoveries, which in total, if they're all fully drilled and brought into production on the expected schedule, which expects they start in 2027 or 2028 for the first field, then by like 2030 or 2031, they would be up to around 600,000 barrels per day or so. Well, they just had a new massive discovery offshore of a field currently, at least on the initial estimates, between 8 and 10 billion barrels for that single field. So similar to stuff like the Tupi or Lula field that was found offshore Brazil, because that's the comparison that's being made, is the offshore sloping shelf of Namibia, both in topography and in geology. There's a lot of similarity to the offshore southeastern portion of Brazil. So, unlike Angola above it, Namibia is suspected to potentially have a large amount of oil. I mean, Angola did have a decent amount, but you can see they kind of have a limit to where their stuff was. It was only about half. And also, it kind of turns right into deep water really fast. Whereas Namibia has a whole Brazil-style shallow sloping shelf and has the whole funnel spoon area there, which is where all this stuff has been getting found. So this specific field, let me flip pages in the notebook here. This specific field, at least based on production levels that have been achievable by similar fields elsewhere in the world in offshore environments, potentially in terms of a safe estimate, could potentially have a startup production plateau for its first few years of about 500,000 barrels per day. So now Namibia is looking like, if everything continues along schedule, Namibia is looking like it could, by say 2032 or maybe 2033, hit somewhere between 1.1 and 1.3 million barrels per day. And that is only with what's been found so far in just this funnel spoon offshore slope area down off their southwestern portion. They still have, all the rest of their offshore, similar to Brazil slope that they can explore, but also not even this entire area where they've been finding all this stuff, not even this entire smaller area has finished being explored yet. So, Namibia is going to, oil production wise and economically, come roaring to life rather rapidly, as numerous businesses and industries are actually already starting to swarm into Namibia now that they're expecting this. And uh, Namibia is potentially, alongside Botswana and a number of other places like Ghana, going to be one of few places where, businesses and companies and stuff that were formerly operating in South Africa end up sort of fleeing or relocating to once, South Africa, uh, you know, implodes on itself like it's going to. So we have that development offshore of Namibia and continuing with all that stuff for Namibia. And then we have over here the rising uh, the rising producer of South America, Guyana. So Guyana now has the sixth or seventh field locked into its production schedule, and various developments are occurring as well. The gas-fired power plant will be finished next year and will generate a constant 300 megawatts of electricity. And they are also deciding the final contract awardance for a hydro dam project that will be put along the river that will provide a constant 165 megawatts. So once those are done, the gas plant next year and then the hydro plant in 2027 or 2028, Guyana will finally have a uh, stable, reliable, dependable power supply. And definitely enough for their population because their population is less than 800,000. And also, their electricity costs will dive bomb. They will drop by, I think they said, an estimated 40% for the people. So their electricity bills will almost get cut in half because the generating power from hydro is one of the most efficient ways, and the gas is literally going to be byproduct gas coming from the oil field production that would get flared otherwise. And apart from that, their current power generation is done literally by diesel generators and oil fired power generators, of which, up until this point, they've had to, import diesel and fuel oil. For the oil fired power generators, they're now able to use the stuff coming from their fields. But even still, even if you do have the diesel and fuel oil domestically, those two are still like some of the worst price wise to be generating power from. So this is going to be a much better power setup for Guyana. And also, they are not just going forward with the oil and gas stuff. Like I said before, the government of Guyana has already been spending their oil money on a number of things. They have rapidly managed to, over the last few years, expand high-speed internet access across a lot of places that will make like finances and conducting business in the modern age a lot easier, which will thus make it more attractive for different companies and businesses and industries to actually enter Guyana and thus then employ the Guyanese people. And they've also built several smaller bridges over various rivers that had no bridge crossing, or at least the only crossing they had was like really old wooden bridges that aren't exactly meant to handle vehicles. And they have also, in like expanding away from Georgetown, where a lot of electricity access and sewage systems already existed. They've been expanding to other places and actually have begun construction on like running water access and sewage systems in some of the other towns and communities apart from just the capital. So they've been doing that, and now also the University of Georgetown. I forget which day this was on. Oh, no, wait. It was in bookmarks, I think. It's in bookmarks. Articles. Uh, there it is. Yeah, it was in here. So the University of Guyana itself will now actually be training oil and gas engineers. A lot of the oil and gas personnel are Guyanese. They are from Guyana, but they did have to go to other universities elsewhere to like get their education, like Trinidad and Tobago, for example. Now, Guyana itself will actually be training and educating its own oil and gas engineers. And also, they, along because the amount of power they'll be generating from both the hydro dam and the gas fired power plant will be more than they domestically will use. They are constructing a nitrogenous fertilizer plant or a nitrogen fixation plant to since they'll have the supply of natural gas coming from the oil fields to do it with as well, so that they will uh, domestically manufacture nitrogenous fertilizer, which is one of the key three fertilizers that enable us in the modern day to grow so many crops so quickly and actually feed 8 billion people. What are the three fertilizers? Say it with me, chat class: nitrogenous, potash, and phosphate rock. And so nitrogenous is the one that we have to make artificially. And so they are going to use their excess energy to run a small nitrogenous fertilizer manufacturing plant. So they can then export the nitrogenous fertilizer, which is rather pricey. So that is, another revenue stream that they will be opening up. And that is it for them for the moment. Let me check chat. Here we go. Oh, that's the first, or rather, the first person other than Wolfhagen that is from Brazil. One of my patrons on Patreon is from Brazil, and I gave him Brazil on the Patreon map specifically since he's from Brazil. But load, there we go. Yeah, so on my Patreon, uh the different monthly levels that people can give are uh any in like the $1, $2, or $3 range is a mild oil exporter, so like Ecuador. $5 to $9 is a sizable exporter like Brazil, and Wolfhagen is on my Patreon, and he's from Brazil, so I gave him Brazil. Josh, my best friend, who's from the U.S. alongside me, obviously he's not from Kazakhstan, but I gave him Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan's my favorite. But then there's also the $10 Persian Gulf exporter level, which also includes Russia, even though Russia's not in the Persian Gulf. But if on the off chance I ever actually fill the entire Patreon map, which is unlikely, then I'll have to switch over to also a gas exporter version of the Patreon map. But you are the second person who has at least vocally said that they're from Brazil. Okay, now we'll jump over to further Ukraine-Russia developments. Just have to flip notebook pages. Okay, so the question of my suspicion of trap, yeah, trap, has been answered. I was suspecting that the whole aid delay, not just on our part, but on a lot of other people's part, was part of a ruse. Like trying to make sure Russia like commits and triples down for the 15th time, and they did. Just like the other several times, they tripled down again. So now everyone, not just and it wasn't just us. You'll notice everyone kind of flipped into new military package mode at the same time. So now, triple down confirmed. So send everything mode was activated, and as I suspected, uh, when the news came out of those ATACMS strikes, as it turns out, yes, we did in fact send 100 or more ATACMS missiles before the thing was even passed, which is kind of indicative that it's a bit of theater. But what do we have going on here? So I finally found out. Remember that Russia is now becoming largely reliant on old, ancient Soviet vehicles that they're pulling out of storage that have been sitting there for 60 years and have been throwing those onto the front line. Well, first they have to be de-rusted and you know have their engines like at least made to a point where they can function before they can actually be sent into combat. One of those plants that did that restoration was in Yekaterinburg, and that's the one that's about a month ago it just exploded. That wasn't even a drone attack by Ukraine. That factory just exploded all by itself. So I said multiple times I didn't know like which one that one was, whether that was one that restored ancient T-55 and T-62 tanks, or whether it was one that was restoring ancient BMP-1s from the 60s. It turns out I was able to actually find out which one specifically. That was the tank that was the tank restoration plant. So that was the one that was restoring ancient T-55s and T-62s into some kind of functional state. So that one has been out of commission for about a month now. So they will not be getting the Russian front lines will not be getting a large influx supply of ancient tanks for a while, which is why in the most recent sort of kamikaze charge attacks, you've suddenly started seeing more modern tanks again. And the definition of modern is pretty stretched in the Russian army standards. So by modern, you usually mean like T-80 at least, although T-72 is even included in that definition. So you started seeing those appear on the front lines again, even though Russia, from a strategic standpoint, probably would prefer not to keep actually throwing away the few hundred modern vehicles they have remaining. However, since that restoration plant went down, they don't really have a choice. Uh, the the one that restores the ancient BMP ones is over here somewhere. I think it's in Amur, but it might be over here near Irkutsk as well. So that's the one that's restoring the ancient IFVs and AFVs. But the one that was restoring the ancient tanks was in Yekaterinburg. That's the one that exploded and burned down. So now we now finally actually know which one that was. And another one of their strategic bombers went down while returning from launching air-launched cruise missiles over Ukraine last week. And supposedly, Ukraine claims that it was a long-range AD strike on their part. Russia has flip-flopped between claiming it was a technical malfunction in the plane and also sometimes claiming that it was an accidental shoot down by their own air defense. They can't make up their mind which story they want to run with. And so, as with those two times back in January and February, when a bunch of regular Russian aircraft all went down within like 24 hours of each other, uh, and Russia both claimed that it was accidental self shoot down, and Ukraine claimed it was just long range AD. I'd suspect again this was another testing incidents of the F-16s playing peekaboo, or the especially the first two incidents back in January and February were the likely two or three that Ukraine did actually get back then, not so secretly, but publicly secretly, just testing out to see whether the capabilities we promised actually did deliver. Said capabilities not necessarily being stealth, but just being the fact that the radars that they come with are better than, the old Russian and Soviet stuff that Ukraine would have been using up to that point, like the MiG-29. As the radar, even on the less advanced F-16, the radar has a much more decent range of lock-on capability and targeting than the stuff that they were used to using before. So they have likely played these peekaboo games a few times, making sure that it is actually like what we promised it was. Before now, they're about to receive like an actual first batch probably meaning somewhere between 6 and 12 next month or early June. So either late next month or early June. So that might have been another peekaboo instance, or maybe it was actually Russia shooting itself down. They have done that before, but they've started trying to like claim that as the excuse for everything now. So I can't really tell which one is which when it actually happens. And we had more. This is Smolensk, right? Yeah, that's Pskov. Okay, I was right. Pskov, Smolensk, Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Voronezh. Uh, yeah, so in Smolensk, that's where the map comes in. Why did I X this off? We need to go back to the map. Go back to the map. It's down here. So I also, as you can see now, included the regions of mass flooding in Russia on top of the black spots map. But these blackout maps, for anyone who hasn't seen this map, these are the spots or smaller regions within the oblasts where Ukrainian drone strikes have taken out either oil refineries or oil storage depots. And while, as I've explained before, while on the offhand you might initially assume why blow up the oil tanks, they're not really holding that much oil, so it's not that big of a loss. It actually is not because of the amount of oil in the storage tanks when they blow up. It is because, remember, a certain amount of oil comes up out of the ground, out of oil fields, flows through the pipelines, and it doesn't teleport to uh, fuel stations or into the fuel tanks of Russian military vehicles or civilian regular vehicles. It doesn't teleport to their export customers. It comes up, it flows through pipelines, and it goes to locations where it flows into storage tanks, from which it is then extracted in different amounts to put through refineries, or in other cases, it's extracted in different amounts when each new oil tanker comes into ports to export it. So the storage tanks are like kind of one of the critical steps along the process of delivery. Without those, the system kind of breaks down, and so you could only keep pumping out as much oil as long as you do have a guaranteed enough storage space to stow it before it gets refined or gets exported. So that is the actual purpose behind hitting oil depots. It has nothing to do with like the amount of oil that gets physically lost because the tank burns down. It's the capacity limit that begins constricting the system with. Granted, Ukraine doesn't need to constrict Russia's oil system via that way because their oil production levels are already going to keep going down via their, voluntary production cuts, which are preemptive cuts to avoid a actual visible production decline that would be seen otherwise. Because uh, now that all of the external oil industries that were actually responsible for rescuing their oil production post USSR collapse are gone, they're not really able to hold it together all that well. At least the difficult Arctic and permafrost stuff, all the stuff that's like regular temperate climate conventional oil could run just fine without any outside help. But all of the more difficult stuff they delved into in the 3 decades since the 90s or since the early 90s, that stuff without help, they kind of lose their grip on and have been doing so already. And they're in the process of cutting back further now from 9.3 down to 9. They've already dropped over the last week or two from 9.3 down to 9.2. And they're going a further down to a flat 9 over the course of the next month and the next 4 days until the next month. But so that's the map of blackout black spots, not for electricity blackouts, but for locations where either a refinery and or oil storage depot has been taken out. So the cluster is beginning to grow, as you can see, and also you have the stuff here that's been kind of, taken out by flooding, including down here in Orenburg was Russia's only AFV/IFV factory that was actually building new BMP2s or BMP3s, whichever one they were choosing to go with. So now that's gone after only running for 3 months. Because remember, the guy who owned the company that was supposed to be making them was taking the government contracts, but then he was just taking the money for himself and not actually building the vehicles. However, like we said before, he was stupid. Unlike other oligarchs that fled with the money, he didn't run off to Malta or Sicily or Cyprus or something. He literally was staying still at his own house in Russia. So eventually the FSB came and dragged him away. After, 2 years had gone by with no vehicle production, they kind of figured out there's something wrong here. And, found out his bank account had mysteriously swollen by a amount similar to the contract that the Russian Ministry of Defense had signed for the company to be producing those vehicles. So after that, the Russian government seized said factory and was starting to produce those BMPs. However, then it got washed out by flooding, and so now that's also offline. What else do we have here? Oh, yeah. So interesting developments. Things might get interesting before I thought they would get interesting. So you guys know Chechnya, right? I'm assuming everyone's familiar with Chechnya. Fun place. It's like it's like Iran, except a bunch of white dudes and a lot less desert and a lot more trees and also a lot worse actually. So in Chechnya is where the creepy dude is from. Hold on. I forgot that I X'd off of Twitter. Let's go to the bookmarks. Like I get disgusted looking at this dude's beard. Like I just keep thinking of bugs and maggots, so I can't look at it for too long. Like it's not beards specifically, it's just this one dude. It's just Kadyrov. Let's get to Kadyrov. Where's Kadyrov? Kadyrov, where are you hiding? There he is. So Russia's own literally Islamic warlord who governs Chechnya. Uh, in exchange, he was given control of Chechnya in exchange for uh, Chechnya pretending to like still be like under Russia, even though it's kind of effectively a cut off Islamic warlord caliphate thing. So he is critically ill, and there's not exactly a planned succession process because he wasn't intending on potentially dying this early. He thought he was going to be around for another 20 or 30 years. So what's going to happen in Chechnya when he's dead? Uncertain. Uh, they whatever underling council he has might just appoint somebody arbitrarily, and everyone might just go along with it. Or Moscow might appoint somebody, and maybe they'll just go along with it. Or they could refuse to listen to Moscow, and they might start fighting. Or they could not even care about Moscow and start fighting amongst themselves within Chechnya. There might be sort of a fractioning of different factions within there. Uncertain. However, I would actually expect, I'm not saying this definitively, but I would actually expect this time, the third time, if Chechnya like starts imploding on itself, I would actually expect, in the current state of things, this time this might be the one region that Russia would actually not try to suppress, would kind of actually just like leave it and just like let it boil. Whereas when people, have started protesting, like the mobilization or started having separatist movement stuff in like Dagestan and Bashkiri and Tatarstan, Russia usually goes Soviet Union ham-fisted heavy on that and starts dragging people away and beating people. But Chechnya, they maybe, if there is still a few brain cells left in the heads in the Kremlin, they might just not even bother with Chechnya this time. It would definitely be like in their better interest to not throw away the resources trying to you know calm down or step in between like different factioning groups of like Islamic warlords. All right, what else do we have? Oh yeah, there was how long ago was this? Oh, it's right there. How convenient. So, Ukraine actually came up with this new, really, really simple, like so simple that even me, as someone who is like, as someone who is behind them, uh, still kind of hates the fact that it works because it just feels so primitive. But they came up with this idea of, you know, for like their the vehicles rushing more troops to the front and the BTRs and stuff, everything that's wheeled. Let's just start dropping like these like big massive tire spikes in front of them from drones while they're driving at full speed, and it works. It's actually working. I mean, it doesn't destroy the vehicles. The vehicles are still intact, but they're not going anywhere. And for the most part, Russia kind of tends to just abandon them and just like leave them sitting there. So this was something that's like ingeniously dumb and something that's just like kind of so far back in time to where you're like, it really feels like this shouldn't be a thing, but it legitimately still works. Yes, even in present day. Uh, I mean, on like a lot of military vehicles, the tires are just big and thick, so the spikes need to be like big spike things, as opposed to like the more smaller nail type spikes that you would usually see on like spike strips and stuff for say regular vehicles. But it works apparently. And what else was there? Oh yeah, there's that as well. So hold on. The SBU or GRU, which or GUR, okay, I guess is the foreignly acting branch of Ukrainian SVU. Apparently can just do whatever it wants wherever. And, uh, none of the security checks in Russia are really like doing anything because they're just running around in Moscow, like at airfields around Moscow, just setting helicopters on fire. Now, by all means, this could not be an instance of actual, and you can see the stuff like actually starting to fall apart inside. This could not be actual GRU dudes or GUR dudes. By all means, this could, like with the Russian combat jet pilot assassinations, that are you going to function? Thank you. This could be uh, this could be Russians doing this, like the equivalent of, like I said, in the cases of the pilots that have been getting assassinated, just like generic Russian street hitmen, because there were a number of incidents earlier this year of Russian combat jet pilots, just like having a smoking a cigarette, like outside their building or wherever where they live, and there's like CCTV footage or dash cam footage of just a random like white vehicle just with like no markings just pulling up beside them, a window rolling down, and one dude just like sticking a gun with a silencer out and popping a shot in the guy's head and the vehicle driving off. That could just be like random regular Russian hitmen that like the SBU was just paying to do that. So I mean that could be, that's not Moscow. Moscow is up here. We're over here. That's Nizhny. Where the heck did Moscow go? Voronezh, Tula. Oh, there it is. It's up straight. This could be actual Russians like getting paid to do this. Uh, I mean, that would still be not the best look. But if it is actual, like, quote unquote, Ukrainian agents just freely roaming Russia's airfields around Moscow, of all places, and lighting stuff on fire, that's also really, really a bad security look. And we had one of the satellite imagery analysis guys who's been tracking stuff. He one of the vehicles that Russia has resorted to for like the kamikaze charges that they've been doing. That's how they've like managed to gain several kilometers of front line. Is basically World War One style, just like throwing thousands of dudes and hundreds of vehicles across the fields while they are getting massacred. And eventually some of them are going to reach the other side of the field, no matter how few are left alive. But that's never really apparently been a concern in the mind of Russian leaders. One of the particular vehicles they started switching over to for that was the MTLB, I think. Am I getting that right? Is this thing? It is meant. It's meant to be an amphibious, not necessarily a lander, but kind of like river crosser. Is this a better one? Is this a bigger image? There we go. Thank you. So it's not really meant for like rapid charges across open ground because it's not that fast. So they are essentially they're kind of just rolling tombs, and that's the role they played. However, the storage sites where they were pulling them out from, as of the latest satellites imagery from like the paid subscription stuff that I can't afford, all I can get is regular Google Earth. I am sorry about that, but they're kind of empty. So they've seemingly reached at least something close to the end of those, which might be why they started using golf carts. And I have covered that in the previous streams that they're using literal golf carts to conduct like frontline uh, kamikaze charges or bonsai charges. I think technically kamikaze is only when you do an air suicide. So they've run out of amphibious tombs to use as like field crossing vehicles, so that they're now resorting to using Chinese golf carts and also just like trucks. But on the trucks, they do put up like fences around the truck. They like weld fences so it looks like a WWE cage match. And YouTube's algorithm is listening because the last time when I talked about that, when I showed you guys those vehicles, and I was like, this looks like an old, this looks like an old WWE cage match. Let's get Triple H and Stone Cold in there. Like the when I ended the stream and I went out, all the ads I kept getting on YouTube were ads for like subscriptions to wrestling's like newest monthly like episodes and stuff. So the algorithm, the AI algorithm is listening. It's listening to everything. It's not listening close enough because otherwise, and sorry, I'm fiddling with the pages here. It's not listening close enough because if it was, it would have heard me say that, like, uh, I don't watch wrestling anymore. I haven't for like the last 15 years. But, that's not the part it's going to focus on. It's probably only smart enough right now to just focus on hearing keywords. Let's check the chat. Iceland. That is the first time I've ever seen anybody from Iceland. When draft uh maybe it's just a rumor. It's just a rumor a run among like the radical Z Patriot Telegram channels. That's Putin is going to announce another like forced mobilization in May or June. Uh, but it's like a 50-50 because they apparently the channel that is saying this is going to happen did correctly call the September mobilization in 2022. However, uh, they also said that there was going to be one in I think like July or August of last year, and there obviously wasn't. So they're one for one in terms of their correctness score. So I'd call it 50-50. So I don't know whether that will actually come about. Like I've said before, I am reasonably confident that even in the narcissist outlook of not wanting to accept that something has failed, uh, he is still potentially going to settle for less and is trying to have the Russian military just desperately grab the rest of Donetsk Oblast, from which and after which they would then like fold out of Kherson and Zaporizhia and just try to pass off the whole it was only about Donbass this entire time excuse and use that to like domestically, declare victory. So it looks like that's the angle that Putin is trying to go for now, since basically all of their current, like, kamikaze charge efforts are almost exclusively in Donetsk Oblast, since they control Luhansk and they have about half of Donetsk, and they're trying, or about 60%, they're trying to grab the remainder, like, you know, every 200 meters of land at a time, traded out for with like thousands of dudes' lives and hundreds of vehicles. Uh, so I'm pretty sure they're gonna try the just grab Donetsk and then pull everything back and say we were only going for Donbass the whole time all along. Silly you, silly you guys, haha, we fooled you. I'm pretty sure they're gonna try that excuse, or at least that's the excuse they would intend to try if they would end up like fully succeeding at grabbing the rest of Donbass. However, uh, even if even if they continued, if none of all the new stuff that's pouring into Ukraine ended up changing anything, and even if Russia continued making its gains in Donetsk, the rate at which they're gaining the land, it would take them like another, I think, somewhere between 4 to 6 years if you work out the math to actually go from where the front lines are now to the actual like borders of Donetsk Oblast. So even that plan isn't exactly going to work out. Although, they could choose at any point to just, stop where they are and declare the current front line as to like just declare, well, this is the actual border of Donbass. They could also just like, pull that excuse out of thin air too, if they finally decide that they've reached a point where they acknowledge that they can't really do anything else. However, I don't think they're going to actually self-acknowledge the fact that they've reached a point where they can't really do anything else, because they've failed to ever reach a point of self-acknowledgement in the past. And anytime they've uh, different forms of the Russian Empire have like come to said position, they've always not recognized it and instead just kept pushing until either the empire collapsed and fell apart, or they actually got like defeated, and just had to like publicly admit some form of defeat, no matter how much they whitewashed the story for an inside audience. But any news on? But I don't know what you mean by news. It's dead. It's like it's not gonna be like repaired or continued with now. Why would it? Europe has severed itself from Russia. They're getting their gas primarily from the upscaled output that's going to be coming from Norway, as Norway, with their capacity and their fields that are lined up, currently is pumping about 13 billion cubic feet per day, which is more than the 11 billion they were pumping a couple of years ago when all this started. And they're probably going to get up to 16. Algeria also is cranking up their capacity, and Algeria actually has always had higher capacity. They just only ever pumped about 8 because that's where the demand stopped. Because Europe previously was getting most of their gas from Russia because Russia's gas was cheaper. However, in the absence of that, now the demand is there for Algeria to take advantage of. And so Algeria is upping their capacity to like what the ceiling limits of their gas fields actually is. And also, about half of Algeria, these basins down here, are still completely unexplored. So there's a decent bit of stuff that's still going to be there. And Algeria has predominantly been natural gas as opposed to oil, whereas most of the other Middle Eastern stuff has predominantly been oil, except for Algeria and Egypt. And Egypt is actually also going to be cranking up its output. It's going to take them a bit longer, like another year or two, but they should jump up from 6 up to about 8 or 9 billion cubic feet per day in the later part of the 2020s, which will then have them exporting to Europe. And Algeria's natural gas consumption has kind of leveled off at about 4.5 billion cubic feet per day. So all of their increases are going to be further exports. And they've gone from 8 up to now 10.5. And by the end of this year, they'll be somewhere up between 12 and 14. And without any new field discoveries, which there already have been several in just the last 2 years, now that they actually have started exploration and development in their remaining untouched areas, even without any new fields, their current assets' sealing capabilities will probably be about 16 billion cubic feet per day. So that's an additional in total from the original 8. That's an additional 8 from them, eventually an additional 3 from Egypt, an additional 2 so far from Norway, eventually another additional 2 or 3. And then there's the LNG that we've been shipping them, which will no longer have customer conflicts with Japan over, because Japan is restarting its nuclear reactors like a smart nation, unlike some dumb nations looking at you, Deutschland, constantly disgracing yourself. But then again, we have a history of that now, don't we, Germany? And then also, actually, Romania is going to be jumping on as a decent gas producer soon, as because of this basin here you can see shared by them in Bulgaria, they along with Bulgaria to a lesser extent, used to be a decent oil producer a long time ago, but their oil is long since almost depleted. However, they never really touched their offshore Black Sea stuff. Neither did Bulgaria. And this flat shelf here is predominantly natural gas. And so Romania is now entering the market as a gas producer and eventually a gas exporter. Currently, they're at, I believe, just over 1 billion cubic feet per day. And they have the potential, based on what's probably there, to go up to somewhere between 2 and 4. It will depend on how much is found and like how porous the sandstone layers are, or the carbonaceous rock layers are. So we'll have to see like what the actual geology is like once they start going and drilling into the stuff down there. But then also we have various other producers now stepping up, like Nigeria. Nigeria is actually climbing in gas production, although their oil production is still suffering. They've upped their gas production from 4 to now 6 billion cubic feet per day over the last year, most of which is being exported to Europe, at least the bit that's not being consumed domestically or immediately sold to neighboring nations. And then there is also the Cote d'Ivoire gas fields that are about to come online, and those in Senegal that are already coming online. And there is the upscaled gas production that's going to start coming from the small Congo, not the big Congo, the unstable Congo where all the cobalt is, but the smaller, stable, trustworthy Congo that's full of oil and natural gas and full of, stability, something that is greatly preferred in countries that, are major global natural resource suppliers, which is why the big Congo is kind of a problem, being the world's, like, predominant cobalt supply and being as unstable as they are. But the smaller Congo is beginning to run down their remaining oil deposits. However, sorry, I had to fix my laptop stand there. However, they do have quite a bit of natural gas remaining, though, and still unexplored stuff in this basin bowl mouth shape right here. So they're intending to up their gas production, which they will probably export. There's almost certainly going to be gas accompanying the oil production offshore of Namibia that Namibia can export, because just like Guyana, Namibia has a tiny population. So their like domestic resource consumption, even if surged up to like first world standards, even if you used higher first world consumption standards like US standards, their consumption would still be so small that their export ratios of oil and gas will probably still end up staying like, 95% or higher. And then there is also Mozambique, who is now rising as a gas producer and should be nearing 2 billion cubic feet per day soon. And they have not yet explored anywhere near everything offshore or onshore. They've also barely touched onshore as well. And they are probably capable of getting up to between 8 and 10. They might be capable of doing more. But in terms of like a safety bet, they you can probably count them in for a future total of between 8 and 10 billion cubic feet per day. Now, all the associated totals that I just listed off are more than Europe actually needs. Also, Europe has managed to reduce its gas consumption by some margin, some by smart margins, some by dumb margins. Some smart margins, like Finland, being that of bringing on their new nuclear plants, the largest nuclear reactor on Earth currently, at a full 2 gigawatt output of electricity supply. Sweden, Sverige, I believe, is going to construct some additional nuclear power. The UK finally decided that, maybe we should stick with nuclear reactors and not do the whole all only solar and wind thing, because that's kind of dumb. And since that's something that's kind of dumb, that's what Germany's choosing to do, of course. Such a disappointment. Poland, though, Polska, is going with nuclear. They are about to start construction of their first ever nuclear plant, which will be four reactors, 1.5 gigawatts each, for a total of 6 gigawatts of power provision, which is about a third of their entire national electricity demand. And so Europe is reducing its gas consumption already through various means, some smart, some not so much, but it will be decreasing anyways. And also there will be, oops, I zoomed out too far. Sorry. Let's go back over here. There will be less demand competition, anyways, as for one, like I said, Japan is reactivating its nuclear reactors, which frees up a lot more US LNG to go over to places like Europe instead. And also, China is going to have, an economic blowback effect internally after face planting in the whole upcoming Taiwan attempt, most likely next year. But like I said before, they could try it this year. This is the first year where there's a solid 50% chance they might do it. Next year, 2025, is still the most likely year to make that attempt, though. But in the economic blowback and fallout from this upcoming misadventure, they're going to see a lot of industrial output kind of buckle back a bit, which will include some portion of natural gas demand, which will then also be, freeing up space on the market for countries that export a lot, like Qatar up in the Persian Gulf, like Australia down here, who outputs about 16 billion cubic feet per day at the moment. And if they continue bringing stuff online as they have been, they might be able to push that up to 18 or 20 decently. And then Malaysia is on their way up towards 10. Indonesia should be following them, but it's going to take them a few more years because Malaysia got started first. And Thailand predominantly, most likely, seems to have gas in their remaining offshore area. And if they go uh, along with the further offshore oil and gas explorations, like they've been handing out the licenses for, they should actually dial up as a gas producer. And now, Bangladesh, finally, for the first time in a long while, actually sold off a bunch of license areas, primarily offshore, because it's a bit difficult to do stuff onshore in Bangladesh, just like in India, or at least in the places in India that likely hold oil and gas, because of how densely populated it is. So when you would have to, like, demolish a bunch of homes and relocate thousands of people to construct even just exploratory wells, it's a bit of a problem. So that's why India has predominantly been staying offshore for the moment, and Bangladesh is predominantly selling stuff offshore at the moment as well. So, from what we've seen from Bangladesh, what they predominantly seem to have, at least offshore, has been natural gas. Onshore, especially around the river mouth, there's a fairer chance that there might be a lot more oil. There was in terms of just comparatively, there will still be more natural gas than oil even in the river mouth area, but there might actually be decent amounts of oil there. But like I said, they're not touching onshore stuff at the moment. They're just the auction that they had was just for offshore licenses. So some oil and gas exploration might start up offshore Bangladesh in the next year or two, and we'll see what comes out of that. And there's actually, although Vietnam would be consuming all of its own oil production, they might have a decent bit of gas to where they could have a minor margin of exports, but it would all depend on a timeline of development, as they've been having issues, developing their offshore stuff, because China continues building artificial islands all over the place, and then like some of these dots down here, and then including those ones, but also some of these down here, and then immediately claiming that everything within 200 kilometers, which would literally include Vietnam itself, of their artificial islands is technically China. And so Vietnam isn't really able to do that much oil and gas development at the moment without causing geopolitical strains on themselves. But, once China removes itself from the equation in the upcoming immediate future, that won't particularly be that much of an issue anymore. Okay, that was a really long off ramble. Usually Josh is the one who sends me on those, but this time it was a random guy from Brazil. Okay, so uh, on to other stuff like I intended to start talking about 20 minutes ago. The stuff in the middle we talked about with Namibia and Guyana. Uh, we now also move on to further economic good news for another one of my favorites, Kazakhstan. The rise of Kazakhstan continues as three automakers, three car production companies already have been either expanding production in Kazakhstan or moving their factories to Kazakhstan after the fallout from all the stuff with Russia, as they relocated their production lines from there to Kazakhstan. And now some of them are even actually starting to relocate stuff from China to Kazakhstan because they know what's coming with China. And they want to, have their production lines for stuff that's made in China not be in a, place that's going to get potentially cut off or might get hit inadvertently or directly by some kind of retaliatory strike from Taiwan in the midst of everything. So everybody's moving their stuff to Kazakhstan. Kia, one of the South Korean automakers, is already constructing a vehicle manufacturing plant itself and is now as well uh, starting work on a car parts or engine parts production plant in Kazakhstan. So they're actually going to have like both steps of the chain be in Kazakhstan for their cars that are made for the Central Asian and somewhat South Asia market as well. So those are going to be in Kazakhstan. What else do we have for Kazakhstan? Oh yeah, and in the flooded regions of Kazakhstan that got flooded along with those Russian regions, unlike Russia, who is, in theory more developed and much richer, Kazakhstan actually like rapidly evacuated people in time in the hundreds of thousands and is now already uh, free to those people whose homes were destroyed by the flooding, is rebuilding thousands of homes of like no cost to those people. And, while those people are like waiting to see how their life situation goes because their jobs don't exist at the moment, is actually like constantly paying these people. So, Kazakhstan is now actually functioning like a full, like top tier modernized country. It's just that, in a lot of places in Kazakhstan, the buildings look kind of a bit run down and look like they were built by, you know, the Soviet Union in the 50s while building them for a people that they only half cared about, which is kind of exactly how and why and when most of the buildings there were built, with some exceptions like Almaty and Astana. But they are starting to do like modernization stuff in Karaganda and other places. And also, they had a major event in Kazakhstan that was like my kind of thing I love to see. It's over here. Ah, yes, here we go. So we had a thing, or they had a thing in Kazakhstan where at one particular point, 770,000 people were doing the same thing at the same time on one day. That's almost 4% of the country's entire population were all engaged in walking around their particular towns or cities and picking up and throwing away all the garbage that they found anywhere. Now, as those of you who are familiar with me, that's the kind of thing I do uh, over here, where I am currently stuck in South Carolina. Normally, I would, prefer living up home in Alaska, back up in Fairbanks, Alaska, in my precious Arctic darkness. But ever since 2020 happened, I no longer have my previous job. And unlike other people, I did not get it back after 2020 happened. So I've been having to live down with family in South Carolina, where it's unbearably hot and where it's full of rednecks who throw their garbage all over the side of the road and smash beer bottles along the sidewalks. And so I am constantly walking around day after day, picking up all of their McDonald's garbage and picking up with bare hands the broken shards of their beer bottle glasses. And it's just me. I'm the only one doing this. I even had to haul a refrigerator door out of a ditch a couple weeks ago. So I'm the only one doing this. It's just me. But, tipping the proverbial top hat to Kazakhstan for having 4% of their entire population willingly and happily step out and pick up everybody else's garbage. That's something I would love to see. All right, other developments elsewhere. Egypt, we actually have some decent developments for once. Uh, the not so decent stuff will take it back over eventually. But in Egypt, they finally gone the way of smarter countries like Jordan and like Tunisia is now doing, or is attempting to do at least. And they have begun, at least to some percent, using reclaimed or treated purified wastewater that would otherwise, normally then be put back into rivers after it's treated. They have begun using said wastewater for irrigation to cut back on their total net freshwater usage. Since water isn't like the most abundant thing, they kind of just have the Nile for the most part. So they're going down that route, and I think they're going to be increasing the percentage by 10% each year. And then over in Tunisia, since we just mentioned it, where's Tunisia? There it is. Okay, I found it on the notebook page. Now we go here, back to the bookmark for Tunisia. And so you see this, and this initially looks bad, a deficit of over 60%. That means the rainfall amount was only 40% of what would be normal in this particular month. However, it's actually great news because for the last like 5 years before the second half of last year, Tunisia was averaging each month about only 3% of its normal amount of rainfall. However, their rain vacuum that was over them atmospherically has broken, and they're now receiving larger amounts of rain. So they're now up to receiving about 40% each month of what would be that month's normal historical amount of rain, which is, that's still a deficit, but it's not, only 3% of the normal amount. So what are you doing, Google Earth? So they have now slipped into a much, much better position, thankfully, and hopefully that will only go further. Then back over in Central Asia, we have further developments for Uzbekistan. As while Kia is going into Kazakhstan, Hyundai, another Hyundai is one of the South Korean ones, right? I'm pretty sure. Or are they Japanese? Which one are they? It is South Korean. Okay, I was correct. Hyundai is going into Uzbekistan, and they are establishing like full process there as well. As in, they're going to make the base components and the actual like skeletal frame of the car and everything, and then also do the assembly plant there as well for their Central Asian slash South Asian or maybe slash Middle Eastern market. I don't know which particular ones it'll get shipped out to. But so Hyundai is doing that there, and in the new situational advent of the supply of mining stuff coming out of Russia and potentially some stuff even coming out of South Africa soon, not being of the most stable supply. Uzbekistan, in its portion of the Central Asian mountains, does have a decent bit of stuff. It's just never really been touched all that much. Most of the mining has predominantly been Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. However, mining companies have now invested 3 billion into Uzbekistan, and they're going to start either starting stuff for the first time or expanding stuff in Uzbekistan. Since Uzbekistan, along with Kazakhstan, obviously are kind of much more stable, reliable places to have stuff coming out of than certain other countries. And then I think the one other thing we had was Iraq is finally getting a bit more, non just oil revenue development. So Iraq now will be the location of one of the major top LED light bulb manufacturers. Uh, they're going to be building a new LED light bulb factory in Iraq somewhere, most likely for the Middle Eastern and North African market. So if you're in like the US or Brazil or Europe, you probably won't you most likely won't go into your store 5 years from now and see like made in Iraq on your LEDs. But people in the Middle East and North Africa might, or Turkey. I do know I have some viewers from Turkey. You guys might eventually see that, like say 5 or 10 years from now. So that is going on for them, and I believe that is about the end of it for this one. So let me check chat, make sure no one said anything that needs to be deleted over. Oh, no, chat died after that little bit. Okay, I guess I need to actually add Iceland now. Unless Ivar never shows up again. In which case, then I'll have to eventually delete Iceland. The map Iceland, not the real Iceland. The actual location of Iceland is really cool. I would actually love to go, but like a lot of other things, that requires money, which is not a thing that I have. All right, so that's probably going to be it, unless anybody else asks anything or like super chats or anything like that. So I'm going to close stuff out, and I'll wait the usual 30 seconds for the stream delay. End up being an hour and a half. I was intending for it to only be an hour, but oh well. And then I'm going to probably go eat something after this. Should be almost it. Yeah, go till 38:10, and that should be more than enough time for the stream delay to have been compensated for. And I don't think I'll be doing the double stream next week because I don't really have anything to do that for. So it'll just be the regular news and development stuff stream on preferably Thursday. I just didn't do it yesterday because I wasn't really feeling it. But that'll be it for this one. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you around next time.